The summer of 1581 brought one of the great events of the century, the founding of a new nation, the first one ever built upon a written constitution, the first to include in its constitution the great principle of religious freedom. On July 26, 1581, the Netherlands, with Holland as the leading province, declared their independence from Spain, as about 200 years later the American colonies were to declare their independence from England. They stated many of the same reasons, but the tyranny against which they rebelled was far more severe, the fight necessary to make good their declaration much longer and more bitter. The father of his people, the great leader of the Netherlands, was William, Prince of Orange, whose descendants today still occupy the throne of the nation which he helped to found. His more familiar name of William the Silent came to him by accident. In 1559, when he was about 26, he was in France on a mission for Philip II with 3 other young noblemen of the court, including a sullen young Spaniard, the Duke of Alva. On a hunting party one day, the French king, Henry II, spoke quite casually to his young guest of a scheme which he had entered into with their king, Philip II, to massacre all the Protestants in their dominions. The king naturally assumed that William of Orange, like the Duke of Alva, was in on the secret, and equally willing to go ahead with the ugly business in the Netherlands. This was not so. William knew nothing of it. The Netherlands was his homeland. His own parents were Protestants. He was frozen with horror at the thought. How could any king whose duty it was to protect his people contemplate such a crime? Not one word, however, did he utter to betray his feeling. From his well-timed silence that day came the adjective silent, which otherwise was most inappropriate for this very frank and friendly young prince. That day marked a turning point in the life of William of Orange. Up to that time his loyalty to Philip II had been as unquestioning as it had been to Philip's father, the Emperor Charles V, to whom William had been almost like another son. As a boy of 12, he had become a page in the emperor's household. His own father was of a noble but no longer wealthy family. Their ancestral home was the ancient fortress castle of Dillenburg, where William had been born. There he had lived a simple, happy life with his younger brothers and sisters, carefully reared by their devoted parents. His mother, an especially remarkable woman, gave her children a true example of good living, not to be forgotten. One day, out of a clear blue sky, came the astounding news that young William had become the Prince of Orange. The title and the immense fortune that went with it had been left to him by a distant relative. This happy surprise was soon followed by a command invitation from the Emperor Charles V that the new 12-year-old prince come to Brussels to the palace to begin a new and luxurious way of life suited to his new position in the realm. It was all very strange to the boy, especially the first morning when, instead of jumping out of bed and pulling on his own breeches, he saw courtiers waiting there to dress him, after which he was taken to help lay out the emperor's wardrobe for the day. But it was not long before it seemed natural. He also changed, as a matter of course, from the Protestant to the Catholic form of worship, insisted upon by the emperor. In fact, he adapted easily to court life and became the typical gay, carefree young nobleman, until this fateful day in France. That day changed his life. Upon his return to the Netherlands, William of Orange began to think deeply and to form the conviction for which he was to sacrifice all his wealth, his energy, and eventually his life. Every individual, he believed, had certain rights that must be respected, and among those was the right to worship God according to his own conscience. I cannot approve of princes attempting to rule the conscience of their subjects, he said. He tried in every way to bring Philip II to realize he was making a great mistake, but that royal gentleman trusted no opinion but his own. After 4 years in the Netherlands, Philip II left the country, never to return. That was in 1559. The Spanish troops left behind, following orders, began burning and torturing in the name of God. The citizens fought back desperately, seizing priests and monks, breaking images and altars, and destroying churches. The nobles and wealthy people at first tried to stay aloof, but when the whole land was threatened with ruin and no one's life or property were safe, the nobles, Catholics and Protestants together, went with a petition to the representative of the king, begging that the persecution cease. The petition sent on to Philip in Spain was ignored. The trouble grew worse. Fanatic Protestants increased their senseless destruction of monasteries and churches. A Spanish army of 10,000 was sent in under the ruthless Duke of Alva. They butchered men, women, and children, and left their bodies lying on the streets or hanging on the trees, as warning to all other so-called heretics. The first actual battle between Dutch and Spanish troops took place in the spring of 1568. 600 Spanish soldiers were lured into an area of swampland reclaimed from the Zuider Zee and perished in the deep mud. In the next battle, which the ferocious Alva himself commanded, 7,000 Dutch troops, led by a younger brother of William of Orange, were butchered. It was then that William himself came to the front. He sold his silver and jewels and mortgaged his estates to raise an army of 12,000 men to fight against Alva. At this time, he also turned back to the Protestant religion. For 12 years the people fought on as loyal subjects of the king, merely to secure their rights. Philip's stubborn attitude finally drove them to the point of breaking their vows of allegiance and declaring their independence. Here are the words from the declaration which Philip II had been reading. Whereas God did not create the people as slaves to their prince to obey his commands, whether right or wrong, but rather the prince for the sake of his subjects, to govern them with equity, and support them as a father his children, or a shepherd his flock. Therefore, when he does not behave thus, but oppresses them, seeking to infringe on their ancient customs and privileges, then he is no longer a prince but a tyrant, and the subjects may legally proceed to the choice of another prince for their defense. Another prince for their defense. That raised a question. What prince? The people of Holland had but one answer. Their great leader, Father William, as they called him, he should become their prince. William of Orange refused. He would continue to be their stadtholder or governor, but he would not be their prince or king. William of Orange instead looked to England and France. He believed that, without the continued help of these strong neighbors, the small new nation could not long hold out against Spain. Queen Elizabeth was invited, but refused to become their sovereign. That left France. William of Orange persuaded the people of the Netherlands to offer the position as their ruler to Francis, the Duke of Anjou, a younger brother of the French king. Not that this young French prince had much to recommend him personally. He did not. But aside from being the brother of the King of France, it was said that he was about to become the husband of the Queen of England. And if that were true, what more fortunate combination could there be for the Netherlands?